The tourist who tried to put out his cigarette on a guardsman thought he could get away with anything, but one unexpected move turned him into a soaked laughingstock and the star of a viral video. How did it happen? The old London fortress stood as majestic today as it had for hundreds of years. Its stone walls, weathered by time and history, remained unshaken. The sun hung high in the sky, breaking through clouds, its light casting soft shadows from the towering spires across the cobblestones. Just like any other day, the square bustled with tourists armed with phones, cameras, and an endless supply of borderline jokes. At the main gate, as expected, he stood, the guardsman, stalwart as history itself. His uniform, a brilliant red against the grey stone, gleamed with perfectly pressed folds. The tall bearskin hat rose like a symbol of tradition and discipline. Beneath this totem, if you will, stood a man whose resolve was firmer than the bricks of Windsor Castle. "Mom, does he even breathe?" A thin child's voice piped up from the front row. A little girl in a yellow dress craned her neck, staring at the guardsman as though he were a wax figure in a museum. "Of course he breathes. That's called discipline," her mother replied, smiling faintly while distractedly glancing at her smartphone. Ah, discipline. A concept that's now treated like a curiosity, a rare relic, a museum piece. How many of these people knew what it meant to stand unwavering, enduring the stares of thousands while hearing their idiotic comments? Likely none. But he did. The crowd buzzed and swirled around him. Some clicked their camera shutters. Others burst into laughter. A few, bolder than most, shouted with mocking grins, "Hey, Mr. Wax Statue! Smile for us! We paid for this!" Ah, yes, here it was again. The sacred right of, "I paid money, so I can do anything." The guardsman said nothing. He didn't react. His face remained the perfect mask of calm, sculpted from marble and eternal British pride. But inside, who knew? Perhaps he was mentally counting the seconds until his shift ended, or imagining himself saying, "Take your £20 and get out." But that would never happen. He couldn't. He was a guardsman. And then, he appeared. Yes, that tourist. Even if you had closed your eyes and simply listened, you would have known. This was someone who feared nothing. His footsteps were loud, almost obnoxious. He walked with the swagger of someone who thought the world belonged to him. His outfit? Oh, the uniform of self-proclaimed kings of tourism. Plaid shorts, a ridiculous t-shirt emblazoned with a palm tree and sun, and cheap sunglasses so oversized they might have been trying to hide his own stupidity. He strode forward, chewing gum with the kind of pomp you'd expect if it were a piece of someone else's national pride he was grinding under his teeth. "Look, Tommy!" he called out to his companion, not bothering to lower his voice. "He doesn't even blink!" Tommy, a quieter version of his friend, snickered as he pulled out his phone. "I'm telling you, they're dolls. Let's see what he's made of." The tourist smirked and pulled a lit cigarette from his mouth. The tip still glowed faintly. Any reasonable person might have paused and asked, "Is this worth it?" But not him. The crowd froze. Phones rose in unison, like soldiers at attention. A murmur swept through the people like wind over a field. "Is he insane?" "They'll arrest him for this." "Oh, I'm recording this." The guardsman didn't move. The crowd grew quiet as the tourist in plaid shorts stepped over the white line. The white line. That invisible border that wasn't patrolled by soldiers, but was known to all as sacred, a boundary of respect, both physical and symbolic. But our hero of the day? He didn't care. Or perhaps he did, but he spat on it anyway. He stepped forward, grinning with such smugness you'd think he was about to win an award for Dumbest Tourist of the Year. The cigarette in his hand smoldered as he imagined his triumphant video going viral. Oh, he could already see the headlines. "Tourist makes guardsman flinch. Watch to the end." "Ha! What if I put it out right here?" he said loudly, his voice soaked in arrogance. The crowd shifted. Some who'd been chuckling now tensed, sensing things had gone too far. "Are you serious?" someone whispered from the back. But the tourist wasn't listening. He wasn't listening to anyone, except the echo of his own empty bravado. The guardsman didn't flinch. His gaze, hidden beneath the towering bearskin, wasn't just calm. It was penetrating. If that look could speak, it would have said, "Do you honestly think you're above 350 years of tradition, kid?" The air in the square thickened. Phones rose higher, cameras recording every second. The silence became oppressive, broken only by the soft clicking of shutters. "What's the matter?" the tourist taunted, holding the cigarette dangerously close to the guardsman's pristine shoulder. "Too proud to move? Are you battery-operated?" The crowd winced. Someone near the front waved frantically, yelling, "Dude, what are you doing? That's the British Guard!" "Relax," the tourist shot back with a wave of his hand. "It's just a show. They're here for us." A show. Did you hear that? He seriously thought the British Guard was nothing but stage props for tourists. The guardsman stood firm. His jaw tensed ever so slightly, and beneath the white gloves, his fists tightened. But he didn't move. He didn't blink. He was a stone wall. He was a monument to discipline, where waves of arrogance broke and fell away. And then, something happened. Something no one had expected. The guardsman's horse, a massive, jet-black creature that seemed carved from the night, felt the tension in the air. Maybe it had had enough of standing still, silently witnessing the mockery. Or perhaps it simply decided it was time to restore order. The horse reared up suddenly, its front hooves slicing the air. The sound of its steel shoes striking the cobblestones echoed like a thunderclap. The tourist yelped, yes, yelped, like a character in a bad cartoon, and stumbled backward. But it wasn't just a stumble. He took 3 awkward steps back, caught his own shorts with his foot, and tumbled. Right into a large puddle that had been sitting innocently near the edge of the square. Water exploded outward in a glorious spray, soaking him completely. His phone flew from his hand, landing nearby with a wet plop. For a moment, silence reigned. It was like the final freeze frame of an old silent movie, only instead of black and white film, there he was, flat on his back in the muddy water, mouth agape in stunned disbelief. And then the crowd erupted. "Ha ha 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 ha! That's karma! Smile now, Mr. Show!" Laughter rippled through the square, genuine and uncontrollable. Some people clapped, as though they'd just seen the best circus act of their lives. The little girl in the yellow dress giggled gleefully, pointing, "Mom, he's funny!" The guardsman remained still. He stood as he had before, unshaken, unyielding. But those who were paying attention could have sworn that, just for a moment, the corner of his mouth twitched. A shadow of a smile. Subtle, but there. The tourist staggered to his feet, dripping and furious. "That horse! That stupid horse!" he sputtered, but no one was listening. The crowd turned to applaud the guardsman and his partner, the horse, now standing calmly as though nothing had happened. In the end, everyone got a show, just not the one the tourist had planned. And that, dear audience, is what we call justice. The tourist, soaked and humiliated, spat out muddy water as he tried to cling to the last shred of his dignity. His bright palm tree t-shirt now clung awkwardly to his belly, and his plaid shorts hung heavy with water and grime. He glanced up at the crowd, desperate for a sliver of sympathy, but all he found were smirks, laughter, and disdainful looks. "Ha! King of the world! Looks more like soaked to the bone!" Someone jeered from the back, sending the crowd into another eruption of schoolyard laughter. The tourist opened his mouth to speak, to say something about the crazy horse, or shift the blame onto anyone but himself. But no words came. And that's when he, the guardsman, did something no one expected. He stepped forward. Yes, a single step. Small, yet monumental. The movement made the air tighten like the seconds before a thunderstorm. Someone in the crowd whispered in disbelief. "He moved! Aren't they not supposed to move? Is this breaking protocol?" The world seemed to hold its breath as the guardsman advanced. Each step of his boots echoed on the wet cobblestones, their sound cutting through the silence with the weight of authority. The crowd quieted instantly. In this moment of immense stillness, the tourist looked as small as a crumpled paper figure, weak, pathetic, and utterly ridiculous. When the guardsman finally stopped in front of him, Everyone expected a shout, a call for police, or at least a look of scorn. But what happened next defied all expectations. "Stand up, sir." The guardsman's voice was deep, rough, and timeless, as though it carried the weight of centuries. It was not a command, nor was it mocking. It was the voice of honor, firm yet respectful, a voice that set reality back into place. The tourist froze. He didn't know how to respond. His self-satisfied mask cracked and crumbled, leaving him exposed like chipped plaster. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. In his mind, the guardsman was supposed to remain a statue, a wordless prop for his cheap entertainment. But this was different. This man, alive and real, spoke to him, looked at him. "Do you require assistance?" the guardsman repeated, his piercing gaze cutting through the man's false bravado. The crowd held its collective breath. The little girl in the yellow dress whispered to her mother, "Is he kind?" The mother didn't answer. Like everyone else, she was too transfixed to look away. No, the tourist mumbled weakly, trying to lift himself out of the puddle. His voice sounded thin, defeated, nothing like the confident swagger he'd worn moments earlier. He no longer looked like the hero of his own viral video. He looked like a humbled fool being offered a hand by a man he'd underestimated. The guardsman took a step back and spoke again, his words calm and unwavering. "Then I suggest you stay behind the white line, sir." The words rang through the square like a quiet judgment, echoing with a force that needed no shouting to carry weight. They weren't a threat. They weren't cruel. Yet in those few words was the undeniable strength of centuries of tradition, a reminder of boundaries, respect, and unyielding discipline. The tourist seemed to understand. He nodded feebly, his head hanging low. The crowd began to stir. "He moved. Is that allowed?" someone near the front whispered. "Well, it saved that guy. He'd have just lain there." "Serves him right for making a fool of himself," another voice declared confidently. Amid the murmurs, one man stood apart. At the edge of the crowd, a silver-haired veteran in a neatly pressed military uniform stood tall, his chest adorned with carefully polished medals. His back was straight, his gaze filled with quiet respect. He didn't shout or whisper. He simply raised his hand in a crisp salute. "Sir, honor to your duty," the veteran said loudly enough for all to hear. The guardsman responded with the slightest, almost imperceptible nod of his head, a silent exchange of respect between two men who understood the weight of discipline and tradition. At that moment, it became clear. The guardsman had not been defeated. He had not broken tradition. He had reminded the crowd and the world that concepts like honor, dignity, and duty cannot be bought or broken by foolish arrogance. The crowd buzzed with renewed energy, but now there was a shift. People no longer looked at the guardsman as a mere living statue. They saw him as a man, one who stood for something greater. Some wore expressions of admiration. Others seemed ashamed of having laughed just minutes earlier. The tourist, wet and humiliated, stumbled back behind the white line. He no longer looked like the king of the world. He looked like what he truly was, a man who'd made a mistake. But the scene would remain etched in everyone's minds forever. The morning after the incident was like any other in London. The sky a familiar grey, buses running on schedule, and tourists swarming the Tower of London with coffees in hand and cameras around their necks. But something was different. Something lingered in the air. Something everyone felt as they approached the guards. The video had already spread across the internet. Yes, that video. The foolish tourist, the dirty puddle, and the guardsman who didn't flinch. Within hours, it had racked up millions of views. In the comments section, righteous outrage was in full swing. "What a disgrace! That's British pride, and he's just a clown." "The guardsman is a true professional. Rock solid. That tourist should apologize." This is a lesson. Not everything in this world can be bought. To most, the clip wasn't just another viral video. It was a moment of truth. One where tradition, as old as the monarchy itself, reminded the world of its enduring value. And the guardsman? He was back at his post, standing as immovable as the tower spires themselves. His red uniform gleamed in the pale sunlight, and the black bearskin hat rose tall, an unshakable symbol of discipline and pride. The crowd that gathered that day was different. They stood quieter. They laughed less. They looked at the Guardsman not with mockery, but with respect. Some took photos cautiously, while others simply watched, taking in the moment with reverence. At the front, the same little girl in the yellow dress tugged on her mother's hand and whispered, "Mom, why is he so important?" Her mother smiled softly and replied, "Because he reminds us what pride looks like, sweetheart." As for the tourist, our hero from yesterday. His name remained unknown, but photos of him, soaked, disheveled, and defeated, were plastered across news outlets. "Tourist versus Guardsman. Who stood strong?" one newspaper headline declared. "Royal Guard won. Overconfident tourists 0, mocked a tabloid. Worse still, the video had gone viral on YouTube, TikTok, and Twitter. Millions watched it on repeat, laughing as they typed comments. "This guy thought he owned the world. Turns out the puddle had other plans." Karma hits fast and dirty. Lesson of the day: don't mess with the British Guard. Meanwhile, the Guardsman remained as he always was, steadfast, silent, and unbroken. Those who had seen the video watched him closely, waiting for a sign, a gesture, a thought. And then, as if to punctuate the moment, the Guardsman lifted his hand and adjusted his pristine white glove. A small gesture? Perhaps. But to the crowd, it spoke volumes. "Yes, I saw everything, but I am still standing." Laughter rippled gently through the spectators. Some clapped. Others simply watched with newfound respect. At the back, the veteran stood again, his hand raised in salute, not to a man, but to a symbol. "Times may change, but true honor does not," the veteran whispered. Not everyone heard him, but everyone felt it. Final frame. The Guardsman remained at his post, unshaken, undefeated, and great. He had become a legend, not for glory, but for reminding the world of something timeless. Dignity cannot be bought, and honor cannot be broken. And the tourist? Well, he became an eternal reminder of arrogance and foolishness. His name may fade, but the video, him falling into the puddle, will live on forever. A warning to all who think they can cross the line without consequence.